You're listening to Art Destinations, a fortnightly podcast exploring how islands shape imagination. Each season we speak with artists and thinkers whose work is deeply connected to these distinct and contained places. Following our series in Luchuita, Tasmania and Venice, this season takes us to Sicily. Hello, my name is Sarah Rhodes. I'm your host and co-produce Art Destinations with Alfio Puglisi, Director of the Sicily Art Residency Program. Together we share an interest in how defined landscapes influence creative practice. This podcast was born from a desire to connect artists working on the periphery and to offer a space where ideas of place and belonging can be explored. Today I'm in conversation with Francesco Vullo, an artist whose sculptural work has been heavily influenced by growing up in the central Sicilian town of Caltanissetta, which is surrounded by rocky hills. His uncle, a geologist, and his grandfather, a doctor who worked with miners, passed down a love of minerals that continues to inform his practice. In our conversation, Francesco shares how different types of rock across Sicily and Italy hold different cultural, emotional and symbolic meaning. He speaks of stone not only as a material, but as a way to explore time, transformation and emotion. We also discuss what it's like to be a young artist in Italy today, balancing the energy of Milan's art scene with the quiet solitude of his countryside studio. Follow the conversation on Instagram at artdestinations.podcast to learn more about Francesco's work. Welcome, Francesco, to Art Destinations Sicily. It's really lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Sarah. It's a pleasure.
Alfio Puglisi from SARP, from the Sicily Art Residency Program, introduced us, and he thought you would be a really great guest for Art Destinations. Have you worked together before?
Yes, so I met Alfio last summer in Sicily. He wanted to do a project together, so we have done an exhibition at his space at SARP, the art residency. Yeah, it was very nice. Like the place is incredible, and also is in this small town close to Etna. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Also, during that week, there was like a volcanic activity on Etna. So, like after the opening of the show, I went up the volcano to see closer the activity, and it was very very nice, very nice.
I wish I saw that. That would be lovely. So, can you tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up as a child in Sicily? You grew up in the centre of Sicily, so it's not coastal. It's kind of potentially insular in its feeling, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I'm from Caltanissetta. It's a small town, like right in the center of Sicily. So I'm like one of those unlucky Sicilians that, don't see the sea from the window. But actually, it's a beautiful place because the city has a very close relationship with the landscape that is mostly made of hills. And when you go out of the town, you have these, huge white spaces and colors. Like, it's beautiful. You see all these hills that during spring or during summer, they have beautiful colors. You can start like seeing them when you drive from Catania, or like when you arrive to the airport in Sicily. Like in Catania, you drive to go to Caltanissetta. You like on the highway, you see these incredible hills with amazing colors. It's so nice. And the area, you can find mostly limestone rocks. So when you go outside the city, you can find also a lot of these huge limestone rocks. They are kind of monoliths, And then we have another famous kind of stone. It's like a calcareous stone. It's called Sabbucina stone because it has this grainy texture, like sandy texture. The area where it's extracted is called Sabbucina, that came from sabbia, that in Italian means sand, and it's used a lot in the architecture of my hometown. Like you can see it in architectural elements or the walls or some sculptures, ornaments, and yeah, that is very very common. And actually, I never worked with that kind of stone, but yeah, maybe at some point I'm gonna do something. But the city still has a very deep relationship with minerals and stone in general, and you can see that because like every year in November in Caltanissetta there is this very famous and international fair about minerals, where people from like all over the world came to trade or sell minerals, fossils. So it's quite interesting because you, like in this small town, you have one of the biggest fair of minerals, in Italy, and I think also like in Europe. So yeah, it's nice. I mean, the city has still this huge relationship with stones, minerals.
When we were speaking earlier, you mentioned that your uncle is a geologist. Do you think he had a big influence on you as a child?
Yeah, so I have this passion for rocks and minerals, and I think it's something that is rooted in my childhood somehow, because like my my uncle is a geologist and also a science teacher, and he always been into rocks and minerals. And with my aunt, they have this glass cabinet. They still have it. This glass cabinet full of minerals and little stones. And when I was a kid, I was spending a lot of time with my cousins. They are pretty much my same age, and I was going to their house, and I was always like fascinated by these little stones with nice colors and shapes. And also, Caltanissetta is famous, or better, was famous for centuries for the sulphur mines. Like, was a big part of the local economy. Yeah, they were shut down in like 1980, something like that. Well, it was a very dangerous work, and health conditions were very poor, so risky. My grandfather was very passionate with minerals because he was doctor. He was helping and taking care of the health condition of miners, or like helping during the emergencies. And most of the time, these people were gifting him like stones of sulfur. So he had also this kind of glass cabinet with sulfur stones mostly. And I'm always been like super interested in this kind of stones, because it's also like they are from one of the darkest place on earth, like the mines. Is described like the darkest place. And this stone is like the color of the sun, it's the color of the light. So it's already a crazy paradox that something with this color is coming out from the darkest place on earth, right? So yeah, I never done works with like this kind of stones, like sulfur. I mean, I have one in the making, but I've not done a lot. But I'm planning to do something in the future for sure.
Where do you think that your passion for geology comes from? Do you think it's inherited, something that's passed down between the generations, or do you feel as though there's something else that's drawing you to the rocks?
But actually, it's interesting because rocks can really tell you what's the age of a certain area of the planet. From the area where they came from, and they can tell you informations. They are kind of time capsules. So it's interesting. You can discover a lot of things about our planet just looking at rocks. And it's interesting also, I think, the symbolic value of rocks, because if you think about that, the evolution of certain civilization was through the use of course, of rocks. Like if you think about I don't know, travertine. It's a stone that was used during the Roman Empire, for example. So he has a kind of symbolic value as well. It's not just the physical aspect or the physical characteristic, but it's also something that has a symbolic value. Or if you think about the marble that during the Renaissance was used in the churches to make the floors, to make the statues, and was used like to elevate the space, to give a kind of spiritual value. So it's interesting, like how rocks can have different symbolism, and can also carry this historical weight, not just a physical weight. You know what I mean?
So you would say that it's probably an intellectual passion for rocks, that these things which we live with that are part of our surroundings carry the weight of history and cultural history, as well as how Earth has been made. You would say that you're kind of reading into the rocks rather than it being so much of an emotional attachment for you.
There are different ways to feel like interested in certain kind of rocks. Like when I go to pick my stones to use in my works, I go in specific places, and it's more like a kind of gut feeling, you know. I don't know, I see something that's like catching my attention and decide to pick it up, but not for a specific reason. Most of the time it's like a gut feeling. It's like I see certain type of texture or color. So it really depends. I work a lot, like I pay a lot of attention to the material I use in my works. So they can carry just, an historical value, or could be more for the shape or the color and the texture. So yeah, it really depends on what I want to, what kind of story I want to tell with my work, with a specific work.
You're bringing together unrelated objects. You're marrying the artificial with the natural, solid and the fragile to create these new meanings. So how are you navigating this? What are you looking for?
Most of the time I like to put a timeless element in dialogue with an ephemeral object to tell a new story. So it's like creating this dialogue between something that is on this planet from millions of years and something that was created by human beings. So something that was created for a specific reason, like satisfy a need or to simplify daily life, basically. So I put these two elements in relationship to create a kind of narration, a new narration, and tell a new story. For example, I have this series of works that's called environmental alterations, where I create these totems made out of stainless steel, and you have these stones tied up to the totem with these plastic bands. So you can see like this combination of the two elements together, because you have the plastic band that is something created by a human being, and the stone, and you see that the shape of the stone is like it looks like it's soft, but of course I sculpted the stone and then I put the plastic band around it, but it's giving you this feeling that it's the plastic band changing the shape of the stone. And of course, you know that rocks, to change their shape, takes 1,000 years of erosion by the wind, by the water. But in that moment, it's like it's your soul is feeling that tension, and you are not questioning the fact that how like the plastic band is changing the shape. So it's more like creating this kind of tension and contraposition with the two materials. But I do this series of works actually to talk about how our habits are changing the environment around us, because the inspiration for this series came from this picture I've seen on the internet a while ago of this turtle that was stuck in a sheet of plastic, the one to all the cans. So it's like little circles in the plastic, and that turtle was stuck inside this hole. And basically, the turtle shell grew inside the plastic, creating a kind of tight shape in the center. So the plastic changed the shape of the shell. So visually, it reminded me these stones that have this kind of circular shape that I find in a very specific part of Sicily. And I started playing with this concept. So I took the plastic bands, I took the rocks, and started working on them, shaping them, and trying to make it look like it's soft. So I'm telling something different. Like I'm telling a new story, but I'm using a material that it's on this planet from millions of years, and something that's ephemeral, created by human beings, and you can literally find in every hardware store. So it's something very common, you know?
I think that's really interesting, the idea that you're giving people a direct provocation or directly inviting them to suspend their disbelief. And, you're showing something that allows them to kind of immediately leap into another plane, really, another way of thinking, another dimension. And your work is really largely about bringing different ideas together. Sicily's history is very much like that. Like, Sicily has always been, a juxtaposition of cultures and things. So even though you're not specifically speaking about Sicily, it's the island's way of being. It is its identity, really.
This is true. Yeah, it's a land that, it's an island that had a lot of different cultures and dominations and influences.
So would you say that the emotional resonance of the rock changes depending on where it's from? So, in Mount Etna, the rock is very black and porous. You can see the bubbles that have sort of dried there. And then there's, in the Stair of the Turks, down the south of the island, there's the white sedimentary rock, and there's the limestone of the Greek temples at Agrigento. Would you say that there's a physically or symbolically, well, I think you said at the beginning, actually, that you use specific rocks for specific stories. Yeah. So maybe you could just give a little example of some of those metaphors that you're looking for.
As I said before, like some stones during the history, like they got this kind of symbolic value. For example, the Greek temples in Agrigento are made out of limestone. It's interesting because they use, of course, a local stone to build something that it's kind of timeless. So beside the, physical aspect of the stone, it's a bit like with this texture and this like cream color. So when it's like when you have like the light hitting the temple, it's like giving this kind of aura feeling that it's very, very specific, very unique. It has also this value, like this historical value. So it's interesting how you can use it to also tell stories that maybe are linked to an historical context. And yeah, as I said before, it's something that we can find in a lot of different materials. I was making the example of the travertine that was used during the Roman Empire, but limestone has been used also to build pyramids, for example, or the marble to create like spiritual places or sculptures, so it really depends. Or like, for example, the lavic stone is the main stone that's used in the whole area of Catania and was used to build like the streets, some buildings and architectural elements. So it's interesting to see how some stones like have this kind of role in the development of civilization somehow,
I thought it was interesting when I went to Lingua Glossa and, it's built, a lot of the foundations are built on the lava, the black lava flow. I mean, there's a darkness to it in a way, which I thought was very interesting, especially after coming from a town like Syracuse, which is very light and white. And yeah, I wondered if it sort of affects the atmosphere of the place.
Like the stone, you mean? In which sense?
Well, just the color even, and the feeling of it.
Yeah, I think it's very characteristic, to have this kind of stones, like the black stone. Are you talking about the lava stones, right? I mean, I think it's very unique to when you go in these cities, like you have all these architectural elements in the streets made out of black stone.
Okay. What's it like living in Milan, and has it changed your relationship to Sicily, or has the distance given you a deeper understanding of the place?
The distance hasn't changed my relationship with Sicily, but made it stronger. I go very often to Sicily, and living in Milan is amazing. Like, you see a lot of people, you have this, great energy, you meet a lot of artists. But at some point, I'm like, I need to plug off. So I go back to Sicily and I stay all the time I need. Usually it's like 2 weeks. It's enough to recharge, your batteries and to feel reconnected a little bit more with nature, because it's really, the rhythm of life is different. So in Milan, you have this rhythm. It's very, it's going very fast and you meet a lot of people, and the studio is like chaos because you have a lot of things, like a lot of works, a lot of materials, a lot of people coming every week to meet you or to see the work. So of course it's a kind of energy that I love, but at some point I need to go on the opposite side. So I go back to Sicily, and the situation in Sicily it's very different because my studio in Sicily is basically empty. So I go there and I have just my tools and a kind of archival stones I collected. I don't have finished works there because every time I finish a work, I ship it back to Milan because all my collectors and people supporting my work are in Milan or in Europe. And if you are living in other European cities, it's easier to stop by Milan instead of going, to Sicily, to Caltanissetta. So it's a very you need to go on purpose. You know what I mean? My studio has a garden because it's in the countryside. So has an outdoor space where I sculpt the stone, cut them, because the dust is insane and it's something I can't do in Milan because it's my studio in Milan is like a kind of basement. So it's a very different setup, you know what I mean? It's nice and sometimes it's also boring, but I need that kind of boredom also because it's giving me space to think about new ideas, because you don't have a lot of inputs from the outside. And most of the time I'm alone. When I'm in Sicily, I'm alone, like in the studio, I mean. Of course, my father sometimes is like passing by the studio, checking what I'm doing. My mom, she's doing her thing. So of course it's like I'm there and I just think about new ideas, or I do experimentations with materials, because the space it's a very nice space, because the studio is in old stable that was used for animals, and then became a kind of storage. Like, my family was putting stuff there, random stuff. And then after pandemic I decided to clean it up and make some restoration works. And yeah, I love the space. It's very, very nice. I like this balance between the two realities, and it's really helpful for me to also to have, like, to refresh my mind.
Yeah, I think that sounds very special, very lucky. I think you probably need the Milan to keep as you said, to keep the clients, happy, and to be doing the networking. And you maybe wouldn't be able to do what you're doing if you were just in your studio.
It's a balance. It's you need to put both things in. You need both things. Yeah.
When you're in Milan, you said that you're working in the basement, so you can't cut the rocks and make that much dust. If you had a project, do you go outside of Milan to work on that, or you're only really working on those bigger projects in Sicily?
Depending on what kind of stone you need to work with, because sometimes, like, if it's marble or if it's like onyx, and depending on the type of work you need to do, you can also go to Tuscany, for example, and work there. Like, there are some workshops. I did this workshop to learn how to carve marble using like hammer, chisel, a hammer, like it was the summer of 2023. So I went to this workshop and I worked there for 3 weeks. And of course, like if you need to do some specific production, like using marble, like white marble or other kind of stones from that area, you can go there and like you pay a kind of rent and you work from there, So it really depends on the type of work you need to do. When I work with like lavic stones or the beach stones, like the rounded ones, usually I do everything in Sicily. Yeah. In Milan, I work mostly on found objects because part of my research as an artist is also based on the use of common objects, waste materials. For that part of production, usually I do everything in Milan.
So that's a really lovely segue, actually, learning from the artisans in the workshop in Tuscany how to make the sculptures. So, living as a young contemporary artist in Italy under the guidance, essentially, of some of the world's greatest sculptors. And what is that experience like?
I feel like, of course, to live in a country and to be born in a country that has such a big artistic background. Of course, it's so inspiring, and you are surrounded by art and history all the time. It's literally incredible. I think it's pretty unique, but I don't feel the pressure of this background. You know what I mean? Like you decide how much you want to engage with it, or just doing your own thing. I, of course, try to do my own things. I have some references from the past. For example, one Italian movement that really inspired me, it's the Arte Povera movement, for obvious reasons, because they were using a lot of raw materials and they were using like natural elements. So I'm talking about like Giovanni Anselmo or Giuseppe Pennone. So these artists became famous for using this kind of materials, but they were more focused on the process than on the final result. In my case, I really care about the final form of the work. So I took inspiration from some of them for the use of the natural materials, but at the same time, for me, the final form of a work is very important because I need to give value to the meaning behind the work. So it's like you need to have these two elements combined together and, matching perfectly. So I really care about how you use the material, how it's going to be the final, the final form of the work. And yeah, I really focused on details. Italy gives you a lot of different inspirations, like culturally, historically, but of course you decide how much you want to put them in your work. I don't think it's something that should be scary for you. You just know that there is this background and it's amazing, like worldwide. Yeah, you just take what do you like from it. You don't need to feel like that kind of pressure that I need to be the next Michelangelo. No, like you know what I mean.
But maybe that education that you have becomes part of you early on, and so it's a really strong foundation to build on, even if you don't want to be following in their footsteps. I mean, to have that education is a huge privilege that not many art students even have in other countries.
That's true, and you have a kind of education to recognize the beauty of things, and so that's true.
So thank you so much, Francesco. That was a really lovely conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for inviting me. It was for me a big honor to be able to talk about Sicily, my roots, and the place where I came from. I really care about it, so thank you.
Thank you for listening to this conversation with Francesco Vullo. Be reminded about the next episode of Art Destinations Sicily by subscribing to our fortnightly newsletter on our website artdestinations.org. I'm your host, Sarah Rhodes. Ciao for now.